Another fine day at Camp Dynasty. I am Counselor Austin, joined by Counselor Collin. And last week, we took our first look into the future with the 2025 rookie class. We played Matchmaker. We paired them up. If you haven't checked it out on YouTube yet, go do that now because it is, dare I say, incredible content created by us, you specifically. And we had a lot of fun doing that. But just as quickly as we look ahead with the current class of campers, we now take our step back all the way, Collin, to 2024, because with the NFL season officially behind us, it's time to redraft the 2024 Dynasty rookie class.
Yeah, we're, played a little matchmaker looking at 2025. That was, like you said, a lot of fun. We've been with these 2025 campers for months now. I mean, almost a full year if you extend into summer scouting, which we do in like June. So been with those guys now, look back on the guys we spent a full year on just a calendar year ago, and then dig into like how did their rookie seasons look and how much does that affect how we view them going forward, and how much are we going to overreact, how much should we underreact, maybe get into some buy sell discussions, all the good stuff that while you are waiting with the draft picks in the cupboard waiting for the combine, and maybe you say I could sell this off for X player and have somebody that maybe I can get on a discount.
Yeah, it's always funny because we spend so much time talking about these guys, and then as things go, you just move on. There's always the next group to talk about, and we started early, and we do that. We never really take that moment to reflect on the classes of old, and now at this point there are two of those that we have gone through and sent off. So this is always a fun moment to look back. We even did it year one when we didn't even talk about the 2022 guys, but it's nice to take a holistic look at 1 year's body of work for these players that we spent so many months talking about, projecting what actually happened when they got to the NFL. We're going to talk all about that. So we're going to do one round, 12 picks, and then we will talk about any notable names that didn't make the final cut at the end and talk about why and talk about what that means. But before we get there, I am going to flip the commemorative J.J. Watt medallion. Anybody who hasn't been here for this is like, why do you have that?
You can buy that on our merch store.
Yeah. And it is heads, which means that I will get the first overall selection in this draft. I think this is a pretty easy one. I did not create a big board ahead of time because I want this to be as natural of a draft process for me as possible.
Mm-hmm.
I want to talk through this in real time. I'm trying to make sure I'm not forgetting anybody big here, but I don't think I am. And I'm going to select Malik Nabers with the first overall selection.
Yeah.
So right?
Yeah. I did make a board and he's at the top of my board. Okay. So I agree with you.
It is kind of impressive that given the nature of Nabers' rookie season, that there is like somewhat of a conversation. Like this was not like I'm sprinting the card up to be like, it's Nabers. Like, I think at the end of the day, it's, this is the pick and it's the right pick, but there are several names here that I think factor in. And that says something about, what this rookie class looked like in just 1 year. But Nabers stands alone at the top as a player that, we talked about for almost the whole process certainly the entire draft process after his junior season ended, getting into that film and realizing what a special talent he was, and talking about his name alongside a player like Marvin Harrison Jr., who had been crowned, the 101 for the entirety of the process for Dynasty, talking about Nabers in that way. And now here we sit 1 year after the fact, and Nabers is the guy on top. The talent really was there. The opportunity in New York, which was sort of a question mark, and I think led some people to get a little bit nervous, even with a talent like this, he proved that none of that matters when you're this good. And he had one of the best rookie seasons a wide receiver has ever had. So really, I mean, could be argued as a top 5, certainly, Dynasty wide receiver overall today.
Yeah, this wasn't super hard for me to put him at number 1, because you saw, especially like the first 4 weeks of the season, it was incredible to see him get like 17 targets week 2. I think we all kind of remember, if you're a Dynasty guy and you saw like, oh my God, they are just funneling the ball to Malik Nabers, because the question, like you said, all offseason was, what is this going to look like? Are they going to attempt, enough passes per game to make Malik Nabers relevant in fantasy? And not only, like, maybe they didn't, but they don't need to have a high volume passing offense when all of your passes are going to this guy. Like, you can throw 25 passes, but if 17 are going to Nabers and then the other like 10 are going to Wan'Dale Robinson, like, that's all right. So it was pretty easy for me to put him at number 1 here. He did this with Dan Jones and Tommy DeVito and Tyrod Taylor, and Tyrod Taylor's on the Jets, but it doesn't matter. You probably didn't know that. You probably didn't watch the Giants once this year because it was a disaster. So he had 1,200 yards, 7 touchdowns with one of the worst quarterback rooms I've ever seen. And so that's enough to put him here, because they're drafting number 3. They're likely to get one of Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders, and that should make his life a whole lot easier. So Malik Nabers look pretty good.
Not bad. And you are picking number 2. Yep. And I think, there's going to be a lot of interesting conversations with 12 picks in this kind of a class. I think we're going to have one here at number 2.
I'm taking Brock Bowers. And there's some names here to talk about, and I think that it's a very good class. That I'll say. But this is a kind of similar argument to the one I just presented with Malik Nabers, where Brock Bowers had one of, if not the best rookie tight end season ever, with, horrible quarterback play. Like, truly abhorrent quarterback play. Put up 1,200 yards, 5 touchdowns on 148 targets, 112 catches. He broke the rookie record for receptions in a season. For any position, not just for tight ends. So this was a special rookie year. Brock Bowers was a player that we talked about, like, hey, don't give him the discount of tight end, and don't give him the discount. Like, we felt a little bit nervous about him going to the Raiders, but we were like, it's Brock Bowers. Talent prevails above all. It's going to be okay. I didn't think it was going to be this okay, if I'm going to be honest. I didn't think it was going to look this good year 1. But Bowers just went in and did work, just week in and week out, on a team that was very bad. He was trustworthy every week in fantasy. He's a guy that could put together incredible stat lines, like the game against Kansas City that he had, where he had 140 yards and a touchdown on 10 catches. Just the definition of reliable, translated exactly what he was doing in Georgia to Las Vegas. And again, they should only be getting better with an addition of a quarterback. So there's probably nothing that's going to prevent him from skyrocketing up this board. And like the only reason, like the only way he can go, I think, is up because he's going to score more touchdowns. So even if he regresses a little bit in targets, catches, yards, like he only had 5 touchdowns. Like with a decent quarterback, with being able to move the ball down the field and using him as a red zone threat rather than having him score on yak from 28 yards out, it should only get better.
Yeah, ultimately, this is also the direction I would have went here as well. I mean, when you talk about like everything you just said, where this was the guy, and we talk a lot about, tight end generally in Dynasty, and specifically talking about drafting tight ends, very highly in Dynasty rookie drafts. And there's, some recent events that have influenced that conversation. That's as far as I'm going to go with that.
Can we get out of this without saying his name?
We can, because it's going to happen. That's as far as I'm taking it. And so, it was understandable that people would have trepidation about taking another one of these high profile, billed as generational guys. Now, it's interesting that both of those players had historic level rookie seasons for tight ends. Because like you said, Bowers, 112 receptions this season. I mean, incredible. 1,194 yards, breaks the single, the yardage number for rookie tight end. I mean, he was the best rookie tight end the NFL has ever seen. And when you watched him at Georgia, and not only this last season, not only his last year there, this was a player that had done it from day one on the best team in the country. True freshman tight end walks in and is the best tight end in the sport for 3 years. I mean, I've thought a lot about it, and it's like when you look at the body of work that Brock Bowers had in college, it almost should come as no surprise, even for a position like this, where we know how, it's slow starts and it doesn't translate well all the time. And you're going to have to, learn how to play almost, all over again sometimes with these guys. But the difference is a lot of those players that kind of face plant with these high first round billings are guys that are not ready like he was. He was ready. He was ready 2 years ago. He could have came in, I think, to the NFL and did exactly what he did this year. So that is something where, it makes sense why this happened. And I think, he's just a special talent. I don't know that we're going to see, easy to say this, but I don't know that we're going to see a player like this for a very long time. And he lived up to it.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I feel like we got to see something that was, special, and it's unfortunate that it had to be on the Raiders.
Yeah. And easily Dynasty tight end 1, right?
That's for sure.
Not even close.
No, we were having discussions about like Sam Laporta taking that, and he's like, I think it's him and McBride and everybody else.
Yeah. All right. So number 3. And this is, again, if there was an interesting conversation at number 2, now it turns into a little bit of a complicated decision here.
I hope you don't take my guy.
Because we have the player.
Feels like a real fantasy draft a little bit. Like I don't want to get sniped.
Yeah. It's that because the names here are. There's arguments for a lot of directions.
Yeah.
I think I am feeling confident in this selection, and that is Brian Thomas Jr., number 3. Okay. So this was an incredible incredible season for Brian Thomas Jr. Not just because it was a great year, it ended up being 1,282 yards and 10 touchdowns. Like, that alone is incredibly impressive for a rookie wide receiver. Couple that with the fact that this was not a player that I think either of us saw as particularly pro ready, in the sense of like the full wide receiver position. Like, we knew he had legitimate, like, NFL caliber high end speed, and that was confirmed at the combine. Like, that was his play speed. It showed up in his 40 time as well. I was not prepared for him to look as polished as he did as a route runner across the entire tree this year. I mean, he basically proved that there's almost nothing that he can't do at this position already. And for a player of his size and of his athleticism, that is incredibly, incredibly exciting for dynasty managers who took this guy, because he has the tools to become one of the best wide receivers, period, in the NFL. And if this rookie season was any indication, he's well on his way to getting there pretty quickly. So I can't let him slip by here. He's got to go number 3.
Yeah, it's a great pick. We talk about how great Malik Nabers' season was, and talk about like how statistically great he was. And Brian Thomas had more yards, more touchdowns than him. Like he had almost 1,300 yards as a rookie, 10 touchdowns as a rookie. And we both, like you said, were a little skeptical going in on if Brian Thomas had like a deep bag as a route runner, a guy that is he just a downfield threat, or can he actually become a real wide receiver? And those like dissolved, especially late in the season. I mean, he had a couple like boom weeks early on, but you look down the stretch, and when he was getting those 10 target games, week 13 and on, he was consistently productive, and he scored every week but 2 after week 13. So this is a guy that like he was completely dominant, and he's a guy that you don't want to trade away now that you have him on your team, and you probably got him like maybe mid back half of the first round in some of these leagues, especially in like super flex drafts. You probably got him at the back end of the first, and now you got just a lottery ticket. And while the athleticism was always apparent, I didn't see this kind of polish coming out. And so now, I mean, 6'4", 205, polish, speed, the strength. I mean, and then you pair him up with Trevor Lawrence, who we hope is on his way to stardom. He's, looking a little, it's like a on and off on whether or not Trevor Lawrence is going to be a good quarterback, but there are flashes, especially like throwing to real talented wide receivers like he has here. So hopefully the Jags can figure things out on offense, and Trevor Lawrence can figure out how to like tie together some consistency in that offensive structure with new coaching and all that. So then Brian Thomas can absolutely explode into like a nuclear weapon kind of wide receiver that you can plug and play in your fantasy lineups, someone like other LSU Tigers of old.
All right. So number 4.
Yep. So Nabers, Bowers, Brian Thomas off the board. And there's a name that went 101 in a lot of drafts, Marvin Harrison Jr., who's still on the board. And I'm going to take Jayden Daniels. Going Jayden Daniels, number 4. So we're one quarterback here, where this is not a super flex draft. So maybe you're sitting here, you're like, what's this guy doing? Don't care. Jayden Daniels just had an incredible rookie season. And this is me also eating crow on Jayden Daniels, because I was pretty negative about Jayden Daniels leading into his rookie year, scouting him. I was like, I don't know. I still don't know what was going on with LSU last year and that offense, because like it was so smoke and mirrors when you have a guy like Jayden Daniels, Malik Nabers, and Brian Thomas, who we've already talked about. Now this is 3 of the 4 were on that LSU team, and like all they did was like run flies and RPOs. And obviously Jayden Daniels can handle more of that, or more than that, as you just watched him light the league on fire his rookie season as a quarterback. So why am I taking him this high in a 1 quarterback format, you might be asking? I understand, but Jayden Daniels is the quarterback that you're looking for. This is exactly the guy that you want to set up and plug into your dynasty lineup for the next 15 years or whatever. Like, it's a dual threat guy that clearly has the chops to stand in the pocket and deliver, that can do it with, Terry McLaurin and nobody else in this receiving core, with a questionable offensive line, because that's all the things we were saying going into the rookie year why he wouldn't succeed. And now he did it with all of that. And it's like, now, like, do we expect him to be worse than he was this year? I don't think so. And so you look at, what he did as a runner, what he did as a passer, the supporting cast around him, he like pulled the Commanders from the depths of like worst franchise of all time kind of vibes that they've had for the last decade while Dan Snyder's been running the show. The whole vibe has shifted with this team because of Jayden Daniels, and I feel great about getting a guy that is going to be, your quarterback for a really long time, and probably going to end up being Dynasty QB1 at some point in his career.
All right. I'm glad I had a couple minutes to process what I just heard, because I needed it. When you first said it, I was like shocked. And now I'm like, all right, it's not what I would have done, but it's also not far off.
Right.
So part of this is also a transparency and a reflection. Like,
Yep.
where did we miss? In this case, Jayden Daniels, for me, was my 15th overall player in 1 quarterback final rankings last year. Obviously too low. He was quarterback 3 for me, behind Caleb Williams and Drake Maye. He was, 4 LSU players in the top 4 of this draft. He was not a benefactor of the 2 elite wide receivers that he had, which was something that I had legitimate questions about, because what I saw on film was a player that was not always processing at an elite level from what I saw.
Yeah.
And obviously I was not seeing something that was there, because he did not walk into the NFL and have the season that he had without having that elite level processing and decision making.
Mm-hmm.
Now he was put into what ended up being a phenomenal situation, because the Commanders, with a new coaching staff, Dan Quinn and Cliff Kingsbury, really tailored this offense to fit his skills. Like, you had a lot of those, quote unquote collegiate concepts, which have now, bled into the NFL for years and years at this point. It's not anything new, but you had this Kingsbury offense that was very quarterback friendly. And I think in the early parts of the season, there was criticism about that. Like, will this be another, Kingsbury 8 weeks, and then we figure it out and now it's over? And Jayden Daniels only got better as the season progressed and took this team, all the way to the NFC Championship game, a feat that would sound ridiculous if you had said that to somebody before the season began. So I understand the thought process here. If you think, based off of this one season, that Jayden Daniels is on his way to becoming a Lamar Jackson-esque fantasy weapon, which was the name that was thrown around, and you know, people were getting slapped on the hand for even suggesting it. If that is the case, which based on one season feels like really reasonable, like it's really reasonable to say that he can become that level of a player, because he I mean, was almost there as a rookie, then I think it makes sense. Because if you ask me, what is Lamar worth in a one quarterback league right now? It's multiple firsts.
Right.
And so I'm taking him 4th overall. In this case, you know, maybe there's a name, probably one name, maybe 2 names, but at least one name that I would take ahead of him here. However, I can see it.
Yeah, I for transparency, I had him 13 overall. Also my QB3 in my final rankings. So that was obviously too low, but also like behind Caleb and Drake Maye and outside of the first round. So here we are. I am here to exercise my demons and to apologize to the Jayden Daniels fan club.
Well, I love that you've taken this moment to go, you know, all the way to 4 to say I was wrong. I love that. At this point, you have put me in a position that I was not expecting to be in, and I think I'm going to piss some people off, but I'm probably also going to make some people pretty happy, because I'm going to take Marvin Harrison Jr. with the 5th pick. And I think they're, you know, the people I'm pissing off have another wide receiver that they are going to sit there and say,
I'll take him next. Don't worry.
I know. Yeah. What the hell, man? Well, at some point, we have to acknowledge that it is one season. And the players that have gone already, the first 4 players taken in this draft, all had like really, really special rookie years. We're across 3 position groups. All of those players have staked a claim for being like legitimate high-end dynasty assets at their positions already. I would argue that that's the end of the line with that category of players. And in that case, I am going to take the player that was our unanimous 101 pre-draft last year. Because Marvin Harrison Jr., despite the numbers, despite, you know, the lackluster rookie season, which, again, full transparency, you probably heard us multiple times last year saying this is not going to happen. Like, there's no way in this situation that Marvin Harrison Jr. will have a dud of a rookie season. And that's, I mean, I won't call it a dud, because I'm kind of sick of the, like, you know, if you're not this historic 1,200 yard rookie player, then you're like, you failed, and especially when you have this level of a billing in the draft. 885 yards and 8 touchdowns. 98% of rookie wide receivers, you're like, oh, damn, that was a hell of a rookie year. Great. Something to build on. In Marvin's case, because he didn't have the Nabers year, because he didn't have the Brian Thomas Jr. year, it is viewed as a failure. And to me, I think a lot of the issues, the underlying factors that led to some of the things we saw this year, are things that can be addressed in an offseason and can be addressed as he, you know, continues to develop inside of this offense and with Kyler Murray. Obviously, Kyler Murray, you love him or you hate him. He was fine last year. He wasn't playing at the level that I was hoping to see from him for stretches of the season, and I think that played a factor in this. I also think his usage, the concerns there, which were well documented, but the, you know, sticking him in this, you know, very, very traditional X wide receiver role and keeping him there for, you know, the entirety of games and not getting super creative with him also led to what we saw. So these things are not death sentences. This rookie season was not a negative even. I won't even call it a negative. It was a good rookie season, bordering on a great rookie season. It just wasn't historic, but that's okay.
Yeah, it is okay. I actually have Marvin Harrison in the same spot, so I don't disagree with taking him here. I think there is a reason that we touted him as 101, and that we said he was potentially a generational prospect. Like, there are like so many things that are good about Marvin Harrison Jr., but making him like your jump ball boundary guy is not his bag. And that's kind of what they did a lot with him. I'm not trying to like boil it down to just being that as the issue. Obviously, there's other things beyond that, but a guy that, had some things going on also going into the year with like the jersey stuff and the fanatics and like the politics of the league, whatever, was also kind of annoying. And then you come into the year, you have these high expectations, and then Kyler wasn't playing great. He's coming off of the ACL injury, so it's like, how much stock can you put into that? And then, Marvin being the only real wide receiver on this team ended up hurting him, I think, more than anything, because we were saying, oh, there's no real competition for targets. It's Michael Wilson and then whoever else and Trey McBride. And ended up being like, now I can, like, if I need to, I can shade my defense towards Marvin Harrison. Like, whatever, I guess I'll take him out of the game. And so I think you see a lot of things going against him on top of, some effort stuff you saw in the season where it seemed like maybe he's half-assing a couple routes, and you can't really have that. So a lot of things coming down to still had 900 yards, still was a very good red zone target. I mean, 8 touchdowns, and he had some incredible catches around the sideline, back of the end zone, the kind of things that he's known for. I think, his yards after catch number is one of those things that kind of tells you how they used him as a player. He only had 149 yards after catch all season, and that kind of shows you exactly what we're talking about. He's getting the ball, and he's either got a guy draped on him or he's around the sideline. So he's going to end up going out of bounds, and like, he's just not getting many easy opportunities to make plays with his athletic ability. So I still wholly believe in Marvin Harrison. He didn't have a bad year. He had a lot of like whatever games where you probably couldn't start him. You probably, like, if you drafted him in the 4th round of your redraft, like, obviously you're pissed at Marvin Harrison Jr. and like the Cardinals and whatever. But as a prospect and as a guy on your dynasty team going forward, sorry he didn't save your season last year, but I think you'll be okay.
And I think something also that's worth noting here is, like, he was incredibly pro ready in the sense of his ability as a route runner to run the full tree, the technique, all of the red zone stuff that did show up, and the the acrobatics on the sideline, things like that. But he was never a big yak player.
Right.
And I think for these guys, for these younger wide receivers, when you're playing a more traditional sort of a wide receiver role where you are, it's get open, get the throw, and, you're making your plays through the art of your, ability as a receiver. Whereas like players like Nabers, who obviously has, elite route running as well, but is also this explosive open field yak player where they can just get the ball to him however they can, like screens or just short routes, let him do stuff. I mean, Nabers, obviously, we saw it in college, and 19 missed tackles forced for him as a rookie, and to go with 475 yards after the catch. Brian Thomas Jr., a player that is just winning with speed time and time again, taking the top off of defenses, 572 after the catch, 9 missed tackles forced for him. Marv, like you said, he doesn't have the yak, 149 yards or whatever it was, and 1 missed tackle force. It's just not his game. It's just not his game.
One is crazy.
It is. It is. And that's, I mean, it was, if there was a negative on his scouting report, it was that he is not necessarily a yard creator with the ball in his hands. And that's fine. But I do think that skill set and the way that he plays receiver might just take a year or two to kind of develop in the NFL. And then you're going to start to see it. And then he's going to become, that guy that is just, always open. And then he's got the chemistry with Kyler, and then they have the connection going. So that's another reason I think, do not be alarmed that he was not up there with these players that are a little bit more creative with the ball in their hands.
I agree.
So number 6.
Number 6.
Halfway through.
Halfway. Well, it's Lad McConkey.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Lad, if you include the wild card game, had 1,300 yards. If not, he had about 1,100 yards because he had, I don't know if anybody, we were tuning into that noon Saturday wild card game. We all remember he went crazy, 197 yards, a touchdown on 14 targets. And this was Justin Herbert's main man. We've been waiting for the Chargers to get him a guy to not usurp Keenan Allen because he left, but to come in after Keenan Allen and be the guy. And we were thinking maybe Quentin Johnston would take over that role last year. Obviously wasn't the case. Lad comes in, they draft him in the second round with the 34th pick and walked into their number 1 wide receiver role and was excellent week in and week out. I mean, this is a very consistent player. Again, I think he was 3rd in yards amongst wide receivers, rookie wide receivers. With his 1,100 something, he had 8 touchdowns, 7 if you don't count the playoff game. He had 3 10-plus start games, no 10-plus reception games, so those are probably still on the way, but pretty much like the multi-tool guy that you expected him to be. Another player, kind of like Brock Bowers, both these Georgia guys, you just take who they were in college and plug them into an NFL offense. And this is exactly what you got. You got a guy that's in the slot 70% of the time, a guy that was a good route runner, a great route runner, really good with the ball in his hands, really good after the catch. He did all of those things, and he put together a really solid rookie year. This was a player, I think, let me look at my board from last year because I didn't have him this high, I can tell you that. I had him at number 9 last year, so moves up a couple spots. I had him behind guys like A.D. Mitchell, who I don't think we'll be talking about today. Had him behind Brian Thomas, Keon Coleman. So there are definitely names that he's moved past because it was just like, and I don't know why we didn't have him this high before the season. We have friends that were like,
I had him at number 6.
Okay, so you did have him this high. So this was a guy where it's like talent and production and landing spot just kind of all melded together. And it was like, how did I not see this coming? And here we are, where, I mean, there's an argument with Marvin Harrison Jr. on whether he should be 5th or 6th.
So he was pre-NFL draft. He was number 8 for me. The Chargers spot bumped him up to number 6 because it was such a perfect fit for him and for what this offense needed. You could see the clear vision of him stepping in to this, slot role for them, but doing a little bit more than that as well. And I mean, even I would tell you that, like, I wouldn't have expected the rookie year to look like this. I mean, I think it's not to be 6 names into a list and to have multiple players here that are over 1,000 yards receiving as rookies. I mean, that's just not something to expect, ever. Like it's crazy that this class showed out like this in just 1 year. And Ladd, in particular, as a player that I think, I had Brian Thomas Jr. pure grade wise, a pretty significant bump ahead of Ladd. They end up sitting next to each other. I had Brian Thomas Jr. at 5 and Ladd at 6. But I thought, Brian Thomas Jr. is giving you the size, the speed, the upside, the potential there. Ladd was like, can he be a true number 1 option? Because, he's a little bit smaller. He had injury concerns like throughout college, and specifically like that hampered his overall production numbers in college at Georgia. So there was like some lingering things where it was like, can he be the focal point of an offense?
Right.
And immediately just did it. And came on stronger as the season went on. Like you said, in the playoff game in particular, kind of opens everybody's eyes if they weren't already there. And now going into year 2, one of the more sought after wide receivers in Dynasty. So again, like to be 6 players in and to have guys at this caliber is just insane. So yeah. a lot of folks were, are feeling pretty great no matter who they took in this range of their rookie draft, except, maybe a name we got coming yet, but we'll talk about that.
Number 7 for you.
Oh God.
I think I know
no matter what I do, I'm going to piss people off. I'm going to piss myself off probably because I feel like I can't win with this pick. God, I just
take them. It's okay.
I have to.
Yeah.
I have to.
Just take them.
I'm taking Odunze. And I understand if you're sitting there with a player that hasn't been selected yet, that had a phenomenal rookie year, maybe a couple players even, you're sitting there like, what is this guy doing? Odunze was ass. It's 1 season.
Yep.
And I will not lose sight of that ever. And you can, I'm going to do this every single year. I did it last year with, I don't know. I must have done it last year, but I know I did it 2 years ago with the class that wasn't even at Camp Dynasty when I took Drake London, number 3, I believe, in our 2022 redraft over a player like Chris Olave that had already been there and done that. Both excellent players. But this is where I am going to look at my pre-draft eval, look at the rookie season, and say, it's fine. Odunze was not a flop as a rookie. The reality is the expectations for a player that was the number 3 option for most of the season in an offense that was struggling mightily. Like number 3 option in a bad offense, and he still had 600 and
he had
734 yards and 3 touchdowns. So over 700 yards as a rookie, as the number 3 option on a bad offense. Like, there is no reason that we need to hit the eject button on Odunze. In fact, I would sit here today and tell you this is the single best buy in this entire draft class. When we look at it 1 year later, this is the player that every single savvy Dynasty player should be going out, sending that message, and trying to understand where the person who drafted Odunze is at. And if they have a sour taste in their mouth or they're playing reactionary Dynasty, take advantage of it, because this is what a buy is. It's not, Marvin, because I don't think anybody is there with Marvin. I think people are there with Rome.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think like people watched the Bears last year and they're like, you can come away with a lot of takeaways from what you saw with Chicago, and I think there's going to be conversations, and we can talk about Caleb later. I don't know, but it's like if you want to take away that Caleb was bad, or that the offense was bad, or that Rome was bad, there's a lot of things, but I think a couple of them are true, and that's this interior O-line like couldn't pick up a blitz to save their life, and that could be on them, that could be on the center, that could be on Caleb calling protections. I'm not sure, but the head coach was an abject disaster. Eberflus, I mean, there was multiple games that he blew single-handedly that we can see, and that's just surface level. That's not the day-to-day how he runs the football team. And then the offense coordinator, they moved on from two of them. I don't know. Thomas Brown ended up as their offense coordinator, who was not even like second. He ended up as their head coach.
Well, they had the Waldron experiment. Right. They had the Waldron experiment, and who could have seen that one coming?
So go through the entire line of succession until Thomas Brown's the head coach, and it's like, yeah, this was going to be a bad year. Sorry, guys. Like, if Rome Odunze could patch together almost Marvin Harrison numbers, who we were just defending, like, I think that's okay. And Marvin Harrison was the number 2 option on that Arizona team, and Rome was the number 3 on this team, and like, I think we'll be okay. I think he showed a lot of really good things. I think Keenan Allen is only getting older also. Like, I think DJ Moore stays the number 1 in this offense because he's still in his prime. And I think, Ben Johnson's in town, people. Like, let's not forget about that. And he was the highly sought after coach of this cycle for a reason. And that's because of what he did with the Lions offense with a much more limited quarterback, I'll say. I think Goff is not that good. I'm sorry, Lions fans. So I think it'll be interesting to see what he can do with Caleb Williams, and what he can do with a guy like Rome Odunze, because I don't think they had a number 2 wide receiver. They had Jameson Williams, but Odunze has such a different skill set where he can run a lot of the routes in the book. He has this contested catch ability. He's a good run after catch player. And then you have DJ Moore, who can play your more Amon-Ra role, and then you're kind of free to use Rome however you want. So I'm really excited to see how this looks, because make some offensive line changes. We've hyped up this offense all last year, run back the tape. Like, we don't got to touch the skill player positions because you have guys like this.
Yeah, that's the one thing where, if there was a massive buy window, I think for some people it closed a little bit with how this offseason has transpired, because I think there is, a lot of excitement with that Ben Johnson brings to this team, and for good reason. I mean, there's so many things looking up for them heading into next year, and it's starts obviously with the head coach being, an offensive mastermind, and you're going to expect to see that this scheme will be, you're going to see shades of what you saw in Detroit. We got to get this thing rolling with, a young core, but I think, by the end of the year, there's going to be, some serious light here at the end of the tunnel for the Bears. Simultaneously, like you said, Keenan Allen getting older, I would expect, there was a little bit of this before the season started where I was getting a little bit excited. Like, man, I think Rome could usurp Keenan like this year. Like, I think he could be like the no doubt number 2. I think that happens this year. I mean, pretty obviously should happen this year based off of, Keenan Allen still had moments last year, but we can see the age starting to show a little bit with Keenan. Would expect to see Rome take a step forward and supplant him as number 2. And then
about Keon Allen getting usurped twice. Poor guy.
Hell of a career, but
yeah, well, age hits you hard in the NFL.
And then, coinciding with kind of, point number 1 is just expecting Caleb to take a jump as well. I mean, this whole thing is just set up for Rome to erase the bad vibes of this season. And so in that case, we have to remember the level of talent that he was. There were moments this season, and I won't deny it, where he looked a little out of character. There were some moments where it was like, this was not the player that I remember, with the hands, having issues with the hands at times. I think he's going to get it all on the right track. I think the vibes in the locker room were probably pretty bad last year. So you get, re-energized, buy back in, and I think you're going to see, more of that Washington Odunze than you saw last year.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how true it is, but there was an article that came out that said Caleb Williams had to watch his own tape because, like, the offense coordinators weren't putting together tape sessions.
Yeah, Waldron.
So, come on. There's no way it's worse than that, so.
All right, so that's maybe the big, stick of dynamite pick. I think, up until this point, it was
one spot different.
Yeah, pretty close. Rome is one that I think is a pretty divisive player, and I'm curious to see how you're going to follow that up here at number 8.
Going with Bucky Irving.
Yeah,
I think we got to go with Bucky Irving. Show him his respect. Going into the year, we had a lot of questions about running back, and it was obviously headed by Jonathan Brooks, who unfortunately, just the worst possible outcome for his career so far, where he had the torn ACL late in his final season at Texas. And then he comes in and I think it's his third snap or something like that, he tore his ACL again. And it said that he's going to miss all of 2025. So obviously that's off the board here, but the running back that showed up to take over the number one running back spot of this class was Bucky Irving. And probably the only running back we'll talk about today is Bucky Irving, because, incredible year. And he came in, and we kind of talked about him a little bit as a 4th round pick to Tampa Bay, as a guy who will be splitting snaps with Rachaad White and with maybe Sean Tucker. We didn't really know what this Tampa offense was going to look like. And it ended up being, Bucky Irving's backfield completely, especially in the back half of the season. He took over. Rachaad White had a little bit of ball security issues, which he's had his entire career. The coaching staff obviously didn't love him that much as just a runner. They liked him as a pass blocker. They liked him as a receiver, but as a first and second down runner, they didn't love him. And so they go to Bucky, and it ended up being a hot hand thing, but the hand stayed hot through the entire year and ended up with 1,200 yards, 8 touchdowns, 224 carries. So, just a really, really impressive year. Can't let him get super far down this board because, this is the only running back that you're going to get out of this class. This is the only guy. And, maybe you have concerns of replacement because he's a 4th round pick, or, the size thing that we talked about going into the year, because the big turning point for me, and this is something that I'll be scaling back on, was the combine. I think that mattered so much, and it was Bucky Irving had a 4 RAS, and that you'll hear that a lot on these coming combine episodes. Their relative athletic score, which is a composite of all of their testing scores coming out of the combine, and it's 1 to 10. And 10 being the most athletic, and Bucky Irving ended up having a 4 or something. And it was man, this is tough. And he's 5'10", 195. He's a small player, had a slow 40, slow shuttle, and it was just everything kind of came to, and then he was a 4th round pick. And it was just kind of soured on him a little bit, kind of kicked him to the side. And then he just chugged out good game after good game, solid runner in a decent offense. So here we are.
There's always going to be at least one player every year that just makes you sit there and just kick yourself. Mm-hmm. And it is Bucky Irving 100% in this class. We talked quite a bit about Bucky early in the process last year through the season, a player that I think we both liked quite a bit. And it's just very easy to let these little factors bleed into your mind as the draft process unfolds, namely size, which is always with running back specifically, I feel like it's very easy to talk yourself into, well, he ran with some good power in college, but is that gonna translate to the NFL when you're 192? And guess what? It did. Like, this was a great contact balance runner at Oregon. It showed up in his yards after contact per attempt number there, showed up on film. And when he gets to the NFL, he has 881 yards after contact, 3.93 per attempt. Great numbers. I mean, the tape does not lie. And I gotta stop believing that it does. Even when, there's this voice in the back of your head that says, man, the size is just a concern. And it's the same thing with Achane. I mean, yep. I didn't knock Achane super hard in 2023 because I just loved his talent so much. But when we got to rookie draft season, you still sit there and you're like,
it lingers.
But man, can I really take him here? Like, am I really prepared to take him here? And it's just a new age in the NFL. Size really just does not matter like it used to across all position groups. I mean, it's gonna come up in certain instances, and you're gonna say, man, if that player was a little bit bigger, but it doesn't make or break players like it used to.
It's how you use it, man.
Amen. And then, like you said as well, I mean, the size is the one thing. The other thing was the testing. The two things that are very easy to
use as a scapegoat.
Yeah. Like poison. That's the word I'm trying to think of. Poison your mind when it's like you've watched the film, what this player is, but then you see, numbers on a screen and you're like, but man, that's really concerning. It just doesn't need to be as big of a deal as it is. So I'm not saying by any means that had I not, read too far into those specific things that this would have been where I had Bucky. That is absolutely not true.
Yeah.
But what I will say is that in my final rankings, I had him ranked 42. 42.
I don't have him. I had to triple check my list. I don't have him ranked.
So, and in our league, he didn't go in the top 48 picks. Right. So, I mean, it's not unreasonable that you wouldn't have him in the top 48.
I only have 6 running backs ranked.
Yeah.
So that kind of tells you where we were at.
Exactly. And it's no surprise then that in a class like that, one of these later backs, the cream kind of rose to the top here, and it just so happened to be Irving. So 42, like that's a huge lesson. That's one where I will be sitting here for, throughout this year saying, I'm not going to let these things affect me like they did with this player.
Amen. Then we'll be at the combine. It'll be like,
yeah,
playing a different tune.
Red RAS, it's coming back.
Yep.
All right. So number 9. I think
it's you.
It's me. And I think at this point in time, things have started to get a bit more wide open.
Yeah, it's a little weird here.
I think these 8 players that we've named, that's the 8. That's the core 8. But I will still make an argument for an add-on. He's like hanging on, the ship is sailing away, and he's like holding on to the back. And that is Caleb Williams.
Hey, I have him here too.
Yeah. In a similar fashion to Marv, it's just not a player that I'm willing to look at this season as negatively as it was perceived. And I understand that at times it was really, really bad. And specifically earlier in the season, it was really, really bad for Caleb. But go back to everything we just talked about with Rome Odunze. It all applies with Caleb. And I think it says a lot, first of all, if you needed validation, which I don't think either of us did because of how much we believe in this player. But if you are wavering and you need some validation, just go listen to how Ben Johnson talks about this player. And the fact that Ben Johnson has been the most sought after candidate in the coaching cycle for years at this point, has turned down jobs just to get to this moment where he chose Chicago and chose Caleb Williams because he knows what this player is. And in the horrific situation that we described with Odunze, this is the position that's going to feel it, more than anything. When the scheme is bad and the line play is terrible and the route concepts aren't good and players just aren't getting open, it's going to make it seem like he had a terrible, terrible rookie year. But God, if there aren't some of those throws that make you say, this is what this player is, then, that I'm clinging on to it. He belongs in this conversation at number 9.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that there were some moments where the Caleb Williams came out and like you could see what they drafted number 1 overall. I think there's a conversation of like the Jayden Daniels versus Caleb Williams and like, oh, they should have taken Jayden Daniels. Absolutely not. Like, I don't think I am shocking anybody that like has critical thinking ability. I'm sorry if I'm insulting anybody, but like if Jayden Daniels and Caleb Williams situations were switched, like it would have been ugly for Jayden Daniels. And I think that Washington had a very distinct plan with Daniels, like you mentioned, where they kind of had this more collegiate system early on in the year. It was a lot of quick decisions, a lot of running. And like, I just don't think they had a plan with the Bears. It was Caleb, save us. Like, you are the savior of our franchise and it's time to bring us out of the depths. Like, we built you this offense, now time to deliver. And it was like, well, this coaching staff and offensive line's a disaster. And like Caleb's confidence obviously got rattled early in the season, and he just like never really got it back. He never was confident that he was going to have a clean pocket, I don't think, once this year, because he rarely did. And so while there were ball security issues when it came to like fumbles, and while there were times where he bought too much time and took sacks, like there are a lot of things that he needs to work on, and that like we were worried about coming into the league, where he was a little too ad-lib. He like ad-libbed too often, and that was an issue, and that showed up definitely, and it became more common down the stretch. But like there are moments, like you said, where you see this like this guy that navigates the pocket like nobody else, a guy that can make throws off platform like nobody else. And like there's that throw that didn't count. I don't remember exactly when it was, but like he rolls left and throws the dart into the back of the end zone. It's like, man, this is the Caleb Williams that Bears fans were promised. This is the Caleb Williams that everybody was expecting. And hopefully with an off season of competent coaching and some better team building, you got to build in the trenches first. That's how all good teams are formed. You got to build the trenches. Got to nail down that interior line. Got to get either a center that understands protections or drill protections to Caleb Williams until there's second nature muscle memory to call him out, because that was the biggest issue, interior pressure. So let's figure this out.
Jared Goff left LA a bad quarterback.
Yeah.
I mean, he was the afterthought. McVay wanted to throw him away, and he revitalized his career in Detroit with the help of the coach that will be molding Caleb Williams. And I don't think it's controversial to say that Caleb Williams in a tools department is pretty substantially ahead of Jared Goff.
Right.
So, I mean, that's really all that there is to say. Let's give this some time. Let's see what this team can look like moving forward. And the last thing I'll say, and it's just numbers on a page, and it doesn't really matter, but I think it's important to just note Caleb Williams led all rookie quarterbacks this season in big time throws from PFF. And I think that is important to say, just in the sense of the player, Caleb, the artist, he's still there and he's still making those throws at the NFL level in a pretty consistent fashion. Yes, he did also lead in turnover worthy plays with 19, and that's kind of just who this player is.
Mm-hmm.
But that's okay when you are the player that he's shown us he can be.
I have a tough decision here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is an interesting spot for sure.
Because, like, I kind of just want to take Drake Maye. I mean, there's a lot of names, and if I was on the clock in a rookie draft and I needed a quarterback, like I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna take Drake Maye. So Drake Maye was my QB2 pre-draft, and this was, a guy that was number 11 in my pre-draft, so he moves up one spot, I think, here, and I believe in his talent completely. I think that they're doing some correct things in New England. They obviously bring in Vrabel, which was a good hire in my opinion. They have the number 2 pick in the draft right now, so that's something that they can maybe add to the offense, maybe not. I'm not sure if they want to go offense or defense. Maybe it's Travis Hunter, who could be both, but hopefully it's O-line. I feel like that's the biggest thing. It's a little bit of the same story with Drake Maye as it was Caleb Williams, and that, like, I still have a ton of confidence in this player despite the situation that they're in. And I think the protection was even worse than it was made out to be with Drake Maye, because you look at what we said going into the year. Sit Drake Maye. He's not exactly 100% ready to go right now. And this team is not ready. Like, he's not going to move the needle for them because they're not going to make the playoffs. They're not going to, they're not competing for a Super Bowl. This roster is bad. And they proved that through the first however many weeks. I don't know. I mean, he started week 6. He came in for an injury in week 3, but he started in week 6 against Houston. And it probably should have waited even longer than that, but Jacoby Brissett was getting the shit kicked out of him like week in and week out. And when Drake Maye came in week 3, it was kind of like, oh, he's kind of managing this pressure a little better because he can move some. So Maye has all the tools and showed them off throughout the season. He obviously was very turnover prone. He had 10 picks and 15 touchdowns. He had 2,200 yards in not so many games. So after missing the first 5 weeks, so in 12 games. So he's an interesting player. I still fully believe in the talent. The arm talent is incredible, and he showed it off. The legs are definitely there. He showed that off too. So as long as they can build around him and, form a competent roster with a reasonable receiving core, like if they decide to go receiver at number 2 overall, I think that's too high this year. But like if it's Travis Hunter, then that's another thing. But just get this man an O-line in the receiving core, and we'll be all right.
421 yards rushing in a not full season for Drake Maye. Even through the process, even post NFL draft, I still think people were underrating this part of his game, the rushing upside that he has. I don't think it was given the attention or the credit that it was due for what he did at North Carolina. So that's a huge part of this. Like, that's a huge part of this player as well. There is this dual threat nature to his game that showed up in this season, in which he's obviously still developing as a passer, and that isn't really a surprise to anybody. And especially when you consider the situation that he was put into, like you said, with the offensive line being, where it is. But the question that I want to ask you, because I think, anybody listening right now might be thinking the same thing. Drake Maye versus Bo Nix. Where do you sit on that today? Like, how close is this?
It's pretty close. I think so for me, and this might offend the Denver fans, but I think Bo Nix is like a lot closer to his ceiling than Drake Maye is. And Bo Nix was awesome. And he's also like a dual threat guy. And he had some really impressive moments. He had some really impressive throws. He was a lot better than I gave him credit for. Like, there were a lot of things that he can do that, like, he just never had to do at Oregon. So, like, it just wasn't on the tape. And not to say that as an excuse, because, like, he made a lot of big-time throws at Oregon. But, like, the offense that he was given with Sean Payton was obviously leagues above the offense that he had to run at Oregon. And he maybe was a little shaky to start, but again, back half of the season, he was awesome. So while I do think Bo Nix is better right now, I still think Drake Maye like showed enough where I can fully put my back him and believe that the ceiling will still be higher, because he's also still 2 years younger than him, and all the other reasons. So,
yeah, that's where I am as well. And I think, that might upset some folks who, we didn't give Bo Nix his due credit last year. That's another huge miss from last season for both of us. And I think, that's definitely something that I'm going to take with me to say, if you don't see it on film, it's not necessarily not there, because you saw the flashes with Nix in terms of being able to push the ball down the field when they needed him, or when it was, designed that way. He just seemed like a player that was very rigid inside of the structure of that offense. And I think he proved this year that maybe, that's not necessarily the case. He is a little bit more of an improviser than he was given credit for, and the arm talent certainly pops. However, I still am with you in this one, which is that I think Drake Maye, it was a supreme talent at the quarterback position, very worthy of being, drafted in the top 3. I thought he should have went number 2. That's probably wrong, but still, I think what you saw this year is not indicative of what you're going to get with this player over the next couple seasons as they improve this roster, and as they, help support him, and as he develops as well, as, like you said, as a younger player in a class that had Jayden Daniels and Bo Nix, who had played a lot of college football and are 24 years old, when Drake Maye was a redshirt sophomore, 2 years of starting experience in college, and, just turning 22 or whatever it is. So that also is a huge, huge factor here.
Yep.
All right. So we get 3 quarterbacks in the top 10. We got this, extreme high end offensive skill talent at the top. And then it sort of like fades out. And now we're going like a bit of a quarterback run here as we're trying to understand what to do with the rest of these wide receivers and potentially running backs. But I'm gonna go in a little bit of a strange direction here potentially. I don't know if this is like gonna align with what you're thinking with these last 2 picks, but I am going to take Xavier Worthy. Because I think, this was a very...
What's strange about Xavier Worthy here?
Well, I think not strange, but like, I think there's just a lot of names that we could go with here. And I think Worthy is just one of those players that when you go back, rewind the film on us last year, you're going to hear this, very common motif of like, we like Worthy, but we're lower on Worthy. And so I think we sort of build ourselves as like this Worthy hater group when like that was never the case. I didn't hate Xavier Worthy. Maybe
no, I'm just kidding. No.
But at the same time, I thought, would he be the player he was being billed as going into this offense? I think is very common for folks with this Chiefs landing spots. We've seen it how many times to get very excited, and we just saw it work out with Rashee Rice. And I thought Worthy was a player, maybe, okay, let's pump the brakes a little bit. I don't know that year one is going to be like stellar. And really, I thought down the stretch of this season, he was showing a lot of, really positive signs. Specifically talking about the regular season, he had 638 yards and 6 touchdowns, which very good rookie season. It's not great. It's not exceptional, but for a rookie wide receiver, and especially one, of this skill set and going 28th overall in the draft, very, very promising rookie year. And then you look at what he was doing in the playoffs, and I think, there's even more reason to believe. I mean, the Super Bowl even. I know.
All right. Super Bowl doesn't count. He had a 70-yard catch when they were down 40.
I mean, whatever, man. let it ride. I get it's garbage time, but what showed up on that play?
The speed.
Patrick Mahomes throwing the ball 70 yards and Worthy being there with 3 steps on the defenders. So, I mean, I'm not saying, the Super Bowl was a big breakout moment for him.
I'm joking.
It's just, I thought we saw some really encouraging stuff from him, more than I was even expecting to see. And I think he definitely he is very worthy of having his name called in the first round of a redraft.
Yeah, I agree. This is where I have Worthy as well. I think that I really like how they ended up using him. I think that's the big takeaway that I have, where I was concerned about, what exactly this player is and what he was going to be and how he was going to play next to Rashee Rice. I think that was another big thing, and they lost Rice was it game 1 of the season, game 2 of the season? I don't remember exactly, but lost him really early. And so it was like, this is all on on Xavier Worthy's shoulders, and they bring in, Marquise Brown also goes down right away. They bring in DeAndre Hopkins, who does not have any juice left. So all of the big plays have to come from Xavier Worthy. Travis Kelce, also like super washed. Isaiah Pacheco coming back from a leg injury. Kareem Hunt also washed. So literally any juice that this offense needs has to come from Xavier Worthy. And they figured out how they can best utilize him to get that juice out of him late in the season. And I think that's what's important, because whether or not he is a polished player, whether or not he's a great route runner, whether or not he's a true number 1 receiver, a high volume receiver, doesn't matter. Because if this offense can utilize him, if Andy Reid can figure out how to use him, if him and Mahomes can develop some sort of chemistry and trust, that's the only thing that matters. Because if he can even be a gadget guy, a jet sweep guy, whatever, on this Chiefs offense, and then also like get a few catches here and there, then we're good. Like, he'll be able to get, like, if he can be what Kadarius Toney was, those like 1.5 years plus like a decent receiver, like, I think that we have a good fantasy asset on our hands. So I think that's kind of where you fall. You're not going to get Tyreek Hill, but you can get a solid fantasy player.
Yeah. All right. The last pick of this redraft, and I have no idea what
I don't know what to do. I thought about taking Malachi Corley for the bit, But I can't do that. I can't do that and like be an honest person. So candidly, it's between Keon Coleman and Bo Nix. And I'm gonna take Keon Coleman because we've already taken 3 quarterbacks, and it would feel odd to be a 1 quarterback show and talk about 4 quarterbacks. But also, Keon Coleman looked pretty solid this year. I didn't know what to expect with the Bills landing spot. We liked it. I would say that it was, top of the second round, pick 33, and there were some true like flashes from Keon Coleman this year. He had 125 yards in that game against Tennessee, but mostly it was a pretty like subdued season statistically. Ended with 578 total yards, 4 touchdowns, and so I guess this is about expectations for a player more than what he showed his rookie year and like what do I want out of Keon Coleman. I just want to see some route running development because that's the thing that he came into the league lacking. That's something that you saw a little bit this year, but there were definite like his main thing was that he couldn't really separate, and he was getting locked up by NFL corners most of the time. And like he had some spectacular catches. He had some nice goal line fades. He had some nice back shoulder stuff, but he needs to just work on the route running, and then the athleticism, hands, all that will follow. The run after catch I thought was pretty good. But as they build this wide receiver core around the most valuable player, Josh Allen, then you can see maybe Keon Coleman flourish a little bit because we obviously have Shakir here. We obviously have Kincaid here. But Keon Coleman, I liked what I saw. I'd like to see him build on that and develop a little bit more trust and chemistry with Josh Allen because I think Coleman's best as like a move receiver, as like a Y receiver that can like be a big slot, but also like if you need him to be a back shoulder guy, a contested catch guy, go ahead and do that. So we'll see what this ends up being, but I still have a lot of faith in Keon Coleman.
Yeah, it was a really interesting rookie season for him because, I mean, there are definitely some red flags when you kind of look at the overall body of work in terms of like his hands were great at Florida State, and he had 5 drops for 14.7% this year. That's like out of nowhere, just concerningly high number that did not show up in college. The contested numbers, like honestly, like 36%. That's like kind of where he was at Florida State. Like he got billed as the like acrobatic jump ball machine because of like 4 of the best catches you've ever seen in your life, but he was not doing that consistently. So like specifically catch point, some fairly sizable red flags from the body of work, but I still think, this was a very pro Keon Coleman podcast last year. We have a lot of faith in the talent. We understand that the player comes with red flags, specifically not being the best separator. I would have liked to see, him not have, a drops problem as a rookie because that's new. But I think just like you said, continuing to develop as a route runner, continuing to, hopefully get an evolved role in the offense because, what was the big concern with him was if we stick him on the outside and force him to beat man coverage, can he do that? And that's what they did for most of the season. Yep. And it was not working. So will they adapt his role? Maybe put him more in the slot. Like you said, he was only there 10% of the time. I know that they have options there with Shakir and Kincaid. Like it's kind of full. There's a reason he was playing more outside, but just finding ways to help this player gain confidence, gain that connection with Josh Allen, and ultimately, continue to grow because he was and is one of the youngest wide receivers from this entire bunch. He was playing at just over 21 years old as a rookie this year. So there's plenty of time. There's plenty of room for development. I understand, some people were very out on him before this season even happened. And if you saw this and you saw, 556 yards and 4 touchdowns, and you already had this negative idea of the player in your mind, you might sit there and be like, well, yeah, he flopped. But I'm choosing to look at it as, man, this was a player that had some pretty significant hurdles to jump at the NFL level versus where he was when he came out. He still found a way to put up 556 yards and 4 touchdowns at 21 years old. This was a promising season overall. We just need to continue to see growth from him in year 2.
Yeah, I think something that goes with rookie wide receivers, we kind of talked about it with Odunze as well, where you see the drop numbers kind of uncharacteristically go up. You see some uncharacteristic drops in general on their tape. And I think it just comes from not being in the same rhythm that you're in college, because you look at, Keon Coleman a little less so, but Odunze, where it's you are the focal point of the offense. And you're getting funneled the ball. You're going to be seeing the ball come your way 5, 6, 7, 10 times a game. And then you get to the NFL and maybe you get 2 balls thrown to you and you're playing 60 snaps and you're running 55 routes and you're only going to see the ball twice. And if you're not in that rhythm, you're a little cold, you're not expecting the ball. It's maybe you have a couple concentration drops. Obviously Coleman a lot more than you would like to see, but that's why, you fall down here and hope that, clean up some things around the edges and become a reliable number 1 wide receiver in this Bills offense.
That's 12.
It's 12.
So that is the first round 1 year later. Of course, there are going to be some names, not only guys that were first round picks that have since fallen out, but also some guys maybe that didn't make our cut, but definitely improved their, pre-draft ranking from last year. So who are the 3 guys that are next man out for you in this class?
Well, Bo Nix obviously is right there. I'd say Trey Benson, I want to talk about a little bit, because he's also right on the fringe here. And then since we're an IDP program, Jared Verse is also right there. We're
literally on this exact same page. Those would be my next 3 guys, with Nix having the season and being one of the big risers for us. We talked about that. On the Benson side, it's a fall versus where, he was. And, to be fair, I had him at number 8, but I think it was okay. So that's right in line where you saw him. And I had the 2 running backs, 8 and 9, with Benson and Brooks. And, and I was pretty clear that I was a little bit wary of where people had the running backs, and myself included. I think you get to this point where it's running back, it's got to be in there somewhere. We got to find a way to get the tier 1 guys into the first round. But even then, I still thought some names below those 2 players could have pretty strong arguments for, quote unquote, more talent than they did. So it's not necessarily surprising to me to see Trey Benson fall out of the first round here, just based on the fact that he was behind an established veteran, a great running back in James Conner, who's having some of the best years of his career right now.
He can't keep getting away with this. We talk every year. We're Arizona needs to address the running back position, because James Conner is not getting any younger. And then James Conner has 1,200 yards rushing and 12 touchdowns.
It's crazy. Yeah. And so it's, it was no surprise. And I think a lot of people, as we do, you take him in the first round. He's behind a vet. 5 weeks into the year, he's not getting touches. Well, I got to get rid of him. The values, it's plummeting. I got to get out while I still can. When in reality, this was always going to be the most likely scenario, was that he was going to sit behind Connor for an entire season. And we're going to see what happens now next year with Connor 1 year older and Benson 1 year more into being, establishing himself in the NFL. And I thought there were flashes this year. He had flashes this year in very, very limited action. So, and then the last name, Jared Verse, the defensive rookie of the year of IDP Dynasty rookies, he was exceptional. So he definitely deserves to, be in that sort of back end of round one conversation in this class.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think you could have argued Verse could have gone 12. I very well could have taken him over Coleman. Benson is definitely a guy. I mean, we talked about this last year. You're going to probably be able to buy Trey Benson for pretty cheap after his rookie year because he's not going to do anything. And then that played out, and it's like, oh my God, nobody wants Trey Benson. That's kind of where we're at. And so here we go.
So that's really, we can probably, we could sit here, we could just run through the whole 48 if we wanted to, but in the interest of time, we don't need to do that. I think, Jonathan Brooks is the exception here because that's just unfortunate. We'll never know where he would have went in this draft because of the nature of what happened. And then of course there's no shortage of wide receivers that are still exciting. Guys who didn't make this list, like Ricky Pearsall is a big one for next year with Debo, likely out of town. So this was a great draft. It was an excellent draft class. We talked so much about how much, we love the top end, but we also love the depth. There's so much value to be had in rounds 2 and 3 and even into 4. And that's really what manifested with this class. It did not disappoint in any way. So
agree.
This is our, our post-mortem, if you will, on the 2024 draft class. We won't let these guys fade into oblivion. You'll get passing references as Rome Odunze is breaking out next year, and Marv is taking the step, and Malik Nabers is becoming the best wide receiver in Dynasty. You're going to get those passing references next year, but really all attention now turns to 2025. So sayonara to this amazing, unforgettable rookie class, 2024.
It was beautiful to have him. It was an incredible, a truly unreal quarterback and wide receiver class. Some of one of the craziest NFL draft nights that we had, where it was another quarterback is going off the board, and Michael Penix when he got drafted, and all these guys going in the top of the first round, and however many straight offensive players went in the top of the first round. It really was a special draft class, and while it was lacking in running back, so it might get a little bit of flack, it was unbelievable at the top. And we'll see how the middle shakes out as we go, and how these running backs' careers progress, and hopefully we can get some real Jonathan Brooks at some point, because he was a really fun player at Texas, and I'd love to see him come into this Panthers offense in 2026 and be a real player. But until then, we'll just sit back and enjoy.
Next week, with the final words of on the 2024 group behind us, we turn our attention back to 2025 as we enter maybe the final phase of the, lead up to the draft, our path to the draft here at Camp Dynasty. And that starts next week with the Combine, which is somehow coming into our focus here. We will be doing some format of Combine predictions. I'll have to remind myself what we did last year, and if it seemed fun, we might do that again, or maybe we'll switch it up. We'll see. But somehow the combine, Collin, is already around the corner, and we'll be
there. We'll be there. You went last year. I missed out. I had to work, but this year we're both off and we're both going.
We will both be in Indianapolis. I'm looking forward to it. It was a great time last year. I'm looking forward to bringing Camp Dynasty to Lucas Oil Stadium. So it's going to be a lot of fun, but we will talk a lot more about that next week when we preview some of the, big storylines and the, projected best performers amongst this 2025 Dynasty rookie group. If you enjoyed our 2024 redraft discussion, be sure to find us on Twitter at camp_dynasty and TikTok at camp.dynasty. But maybe more importantly, if you are listening on the pod feed, like, follow, share, review, do all of those things. And, head over to YouTube as well, where you can, catch things like our perfect matches, catch up on that, and also like this video as well if you're already on YouTube, because we appreciate it. Hit subscribe, all of those, ridiculous things that everybody asks you to do. We just, do it if you want to.
Then when you're done with that, come see me in Marvel Rivals and get your ass kicked.
Wow, fighting words. All right. Thanks for stopping by Camp Dynasty this week, and we'll see you next week.